My name is Victoria Chun and I'm 27 years old. Standing in the pouring rain outside my childhood home, I clutched a lawyer's letter with trembling hands. The ink was already smearing, but the words were burned into my memory forever. My parents had transferred the deed of our family house to my younger brother Ryan, without telling me. Through the glowing windows, I could see him celebrating with his wife, champagne glasses raised in triumph. But this wasn't just about losing a house. I had just discovered they had also emptied my college fund, the money I thought was safely waiting for my future children's education. Before we dive into this story of betrayal and revenge, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories. You won't believe what happens next when a family's greed finally meets its match. The rain continued to pound against my shoulders as memories flooded back with painful clarity. I had always suspected my parents favored Ryan, but I never imagined they were capable of this level of calculated betrayal. Growing up, the signs were everywhere, but I had been too naive to see them. While Ryan coasted through college on a full ride that my parents secretly supplemented, I worked 3 different jobs just to afford my tuition and living expenses. Even after graduation, when I moved back into the family home, I insisted on paying rent while I saved for my own place. My parents claimed they were proud of my independence, but now I realized they were just collecting money from me while planning to give everything to my golden boy brother. The lawyer's letter contained devastating details that made my stomach churn. My parents hadn't just decided to give Ryan the house recently. They had been planning this for over 6 months, carefully orchestrating every legal document behind my back. The house that held every childhood memory, every scraped knee on the front porch, every family dinner around the kitchen table, was now legally Ryan's property. But the house was just the beginning of their deception. When I called my college fund manager the next morning, the truth hit me like a sledgehammer. The account that should have contained nearly $40,000 was completely empty. My parents had told me for years that they were keeping it safe for when I needed it for my future family. Instead, they had systematically drained every penny and transferred it to Ryan's investment portfolio. The bank representative's sympathetic voice echoed in my ears as she confirmed that my parents, as the account holders, had every legal right to withdraw the funds. That afternoon, I drove to my childhood best friend Kelly's house, desperately needing someone who would understand the magnitude of this betrayal. Kelly had grown up 3 houses down from us, and her family had always been like a second home to me. Surely she would be as outraged as I was about my family's actions. But when I knocked on her door, the guilty expression that flashed across her face told me everything I needed to know before she even spoke. Victoria, I'm so sorry, Kelly stammered, unable to meet my eyes. I wanted to tell you, but Ryan made me promise to keep quiet. The words hit me harder than any physical blow could have. My best friend, the person I had shared every secret and dream with since elementary school, had been part of the conspiracy against me. As Kelly reluctantly explained, Ryan had approached her 2 months earlier with a proposal that made my blood boil. He had paid her $5,000 to stay silent about the house transfer, and to report back to him about any conversations we had regarding my family's finances. The betrayal from Kelly cut deeper than losing the house or the money. She had sat across from me at countless coffee dates, listening to me worry about my financial future, knowing the entire time that my safety net had been ripped away. She had nodded sympathetically when I talked about my dreams of buying my own home, all while taking money from my brother to keep his secrets. The foundation of trust one had built my entire life on was crumbling beneath my feet. And I realized that this wasn't just about losing my inheritance. I was losing my entire sense of family, friendship, and security. Standing in Kelly's living room, watching her count out crumpled $20 bills to pay me back the money Ryan had given her, I understood that this betrayal ran much deeper than I had initially realized. This wasn't a spontaneous decision by my parents or a moment of weakness. This was a carefully planned campaign to systematically exclude me from my own family's legacy, while enriching Ryan at my expense. The people I had trusted most in the world had been working against me for months, and I had been completely oblivious to their machinations. The next morning, I sat in the sterile office of attorney Jennifer Walsh, clutching a manila folder filled with every document I could find related to my family's finances. Jennifer specialized in family law and had agreed to review my case pro bono after hearing my initial story. What she discovered in those documents would haunt me for months to come. The house transfer was just the tip of an enormous iceberg of financial manipulation and theft. Victoria, I need you to prepare yourself for what I'm about to tell you, Jennifer said, her voice grave as she spread documents across her mahogany desk. This goes far beyond what you initially suspected. As she walked me through bank statements, property records, and legal documents, the full scope of my family's betrayal became clear. My grandmother's antique jewelry collection, worth an estimated $30,000, had been quietly transferred to Ryan's wife, Brittany, 6 months earlier. The family heirlooms that were supposed to pass down through the women of our family were now legally owned by a woman who had married into our family just 2 years ago. Even more devastating was the discovery of what happened to my grandmother's small but valuable investment account. When Grandma Rose passed away 3 years earlier, she had specifically mentioned in her will that her stock portfolio should be divided equally between Ryan and me. The account, which had grown to nearly $25,000, had been entirely liquidated and deposited into Ryan's personal checking account. My parents, as executors of the will, had simply ignored their mother's final wishes and given everything to their favored child. But the most shocking revelation came when Jennifer showed me a series of fabricated documents that had been used to justify my exclusion from the family assets. Brittany, Ryan's wife, had systematically created an elaborate false narrative about my character and financial responsibility. She had doctored photographs from my social media accounts, making innocent pictures of me at parties look like evidence of drug use and reckless behavior. She had created fake receipts for expensive purchases I had never made, suggesting I was secretly wealthy and hiding money from my family. Even more insidious was Brittany's manipulation of witness statements. She had somehow convinced 3 family friends to sign sworn affidavits claiming they had witnessed me engaging in illegal drug transactions and irresponsible financial behavior. These friends, people who had known me since childhood, had been persuaded through a combination of lies and financial incentives to provide false testimony about my character. Jennifer's investigation revealed that Brittany had paid each witness between $500 and $1,000 for their statements. The conspiracy involved more family members than I could have imagined. My cousin Derek, who had always been struggling financially with his failing landscaping business, had become one of Brittany's key accomplices. Phone records showed dozens of calls between Derek and Brittany over the past 8 months, during which they coordinated their stories and planned their strategy. Derek had been promised a substantial loan from Ryan to save his business in exchange for his cooperation in building the case against my character. Most heartbreaking of all was the realization of how thoroughly Brittany had manipulated my parents. She had presented them with fabricated bank statements, suggesting that I had been secretly accumulating wealth, while pretending to struggle financially. According to these fake documents, I supposedly had hidden accounts containing over $70,000, making my requests for family support appear dishonest and manipulative. My parents, who had always prided themselves on their fairness and integrity, had been completely deceived by Brittany's sophisticated lies. The depth of the deception became even more apparent when Jennifer discovered that Brittany had been intercepting my mail for months, using a forwarding service to redirect important financial documents to a post office box under her control. This explained why I had missed several important notices about changes to family accounts and legal proceedings. She had effectively isolated me from information about my own financial interests while building her case against me. As I sat in that lawyer's office, surrounded by evidence of my family's systematic betrayal, I felt a rage building inside me that I had never experienced before. This wasn't just about money or property anymore. This was about a deliberate, calculated campaign to destroy my reputation, isolate me from my family, and steal not just my inheritance but my entire identity as a valued family member. Brittany hadn't just taken my material possessions. She had stolen my place in my own family's history. The final blow came when Jennifer handed me an eviction notice that had been filed against me 3 days earlier. Despite having paid rent faithfully for 2 years, I was being legally removed from my childhood home with just 30 days' notice. Ryan and Brittany were moving quickly to complete their takeover, and I was running out of time to fight back. As I walked out of Jennifer's office that day, I knew that my old life was over, but I had no idea what kind of person I would need to become to survive what was coming next. 3 days after receiving the eviction notice, I found myself sitting across from Elena Rodriguez in a cramped coffee shop downtown. Elena was a private investigator who specialized in family fraud cases, and Jennifer had recommended her as someone who could help me build a defense against my family's conspiracy. At first glance, Elena looked like she couldn't intimidate a butterfly, but the steel in her dark eyes and the methodical way she took notes told me I had found exactly the ally I needed. "I've seen cases like this before, Victoria," Elena said, stirring her black coffee with mechanical precision. "Family theft often involves sophisticated manipulation tactics, and your sister-in-law's approach is textbook emotional and financial abuse. But here's what they probably don't know. People who are this systematic about their crimes usually leave extensive paper trails." Elena's confidence was the first ray of hope I had felt in weeks. She had built her career on exposing family fraud, and she recognized patterns in my case that suggested much larger criminal activity. Elena's investigation began immediately, and within 48 hours, she had uncovered Ryan's first major mistake. While researching property records at the courthouse, she discovered that Ryan had been forging our father's signature on multiple documents for over 2 years. The signatures on recent bank withdrawals and property transfers showed clear inconsistencies when compared to my father's authentic signature from earlier documents. Elena had worked with handwriting experts before, and she was confident that a forensic analysis would prove the forgeries beyond any doubt. But Elena's most shocking discovery came from running a background check on Brittany. My brother's wife wasn't the innocent newcomer to our family that she pretended to be. Elena's research revealed that Brittany had been married twice before, and in both cases, she had somehow managed to gain control of significant family assets before the relationships ended. Court records from Arizona showed that Brittany's first husband's family had accused her of elder manipulation, claiming she had convinced his elderly mother to change her will in Brittany's favor just months before the woman's death. Even more damning was the discovery that Brittany had used identical tactics with her second marriage. She had systematically alienated her second husband from his siblings by creating false evidence of their supposed financial irresponsibility, then convinced him to exclude them from his inheritance. The pattern was unmistakable. Brittany was a professional inheritance thief who had perfected her methods through years of practice. My family was just her latest target, and Ryan was either a willing accomplice or another one of her victims. Armed with this information, I decided to implement Elena's suggested strategy, a complete tactical retreat that would make my family believe they had won while I gathered evidence of their crimes. I called Ryan and arranged a meeting at our parents' house, where I delivered an Oscar-worthy performance of defeat and resignation. With tears in my eyes, I told my family that I accepted their decision and would be moving across the country to start fresh. I apologized for any trouble I had caused and even thanked Ryan for taking care of our parents' financial affairs. The relief on Brittany's face was unmistakable when I announced my plans to leave. She probably thought she had successfully eliminated the only threat to her scheme. Ryan seemed almost guilty about my apparent surrender, but Brittany quickly steered the conversation toward practical matters like moving timelines and forwarding addresses. My parents, who had been avoiding eye contact with me for weeks, finally seemed comfortable in my presence again, probably because they believed their difficult decision was finally behind them. But while I was publicly accepting defeat, Elena was secretly installing recording equipment throughout my childhood bedroom and the common areas of the house. With my parents' unwitting permission to pack my things slowly, I was able to plant listening devices that would capture conversations for the next several weeks. Elena assured me that as long as I was still legally a resident of the house, these recordings would be admissible in court. The first major breakthrough came just 3 days after my fake surrender. Elena's hidden microphones captured a late-night conversation between Ryan and Brittany that revealed the true scope of their criminal enterprise. They weren't just planning to steal my inheritance. They were actively working to have our parents declared mentally incompetent, so they could gain complete control over their estimated $400,000 in remaining assets. Brittany had already consulted with a lawyer about the competency process and had scheduled preliminary medical evaluations for our parents without their knowledge. However, my moment of triumph was short-lived. Elena's investigation also revealed that my Uncle James, my father's brother who I had hoped would support my case, had been compromised by Ryan's operation. Phone records showed that James had received a substantial loan from Ryan just weeks before my inheritance was transferred, effectively buying his silence and cooperation. When I had reached out to Uncle James for family support, he had immediately reported our conversation back to Ryan, giving them advance warning about my suspicions and my intention to fight back. The recording equipment also captured conversations that revealed how extensively Brittany had infiltrated our family's social network. She had been systematically collecting information about my personal life, my financial struggles, and my relationships for over a year. Every family dinner, every casual conversation, every shared confidence had been weaponized against me in her campaign to prove my unworthiness. Even worse, she had convinced several family members to actively monitor my behavior and report back to her about any signs of financial improvement or stability that might undermine her narrative about my irresponsibility. As I sat in Elena's office listening to transcripts of these conversations, I realized that my family's betrayal was even more extensive and calculated than I had imagined. This wasn't just about greed or favoritism. It was about a systematic campaign to erase me from my own family's legacy. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I had concrete evidence of their crimes and a clear strategy for fighting back. Elena's recordings had given me the ammunition I needed to shift from defense to offense, and I was ready to show my family that they had seriously underestimated their victim. Elena's evidence was compelling, but we both knew that fighting a conspiracy this sophisticated would require more than just recordings and background checks. That's why she introduced me to Miranda Wells, a forensic accountant whose reputation for unraveling complex financial crimes was legendary in legal circles. Miranda had previously worked for the FBI's white-collar crime division before starting her own practice, and she brought a level of expertise to my case that immediately elevated our entire operation. Miranda's first analysis of my family's financial records revealed something that neither Elena nor I had suspected. Ryan wasn't just stealing from me, he had been systematically draining our parents' accounts for nearly 2 years. Bank records showed a pattern of increasingly large withdrawals from my parents' savings and retirement accounts, all bearing forged signatures that Ryan had been perfecting over time. What we had initially assumed was a recent conspiracy to steal my inheritance was actually part of a much longer criminal enterprise. The scope of Ryan's financial crimes was staggering. Miranda's forensic analysis revealed that he had stolen over $80,000 from our parents through a combination of forged checks, unauthorized bank transfers, and fraudulent loan applications. He had been using our father's identity to secure personal loans against the value of the family home, then funneling that money into his own investment accounts. The house that my parents thought they owned free and clear was actually encumbered by over $60,000 in debt that Ryan had secretly created. Even more shocking was Miranda's discovery that Brittany was operating a sophisticated inheritance theft ring that extended far beyond our family. Financial records connected her to at least 4 other families across 3 different states, each following the same pattern of manipulation, false documentation, and systematic asset transfer. Brittany wasn't just a gold digger who had targeted my brother. She was a professional criminal who had made inheritance theft her full-time occupation. Miranda's investigation also revealed the extent of Brittany's network of accomplices and victims. Derek, my cousin, was deeply in debt and facing bankruptcy when Brittany first approached him with her scheme. She had offered him not just the promise of a loan from Ryan, but also a percentage of the stolen inheritance if he successfully helped discredit my character. Derek's financial desperation had made him the perfect accomplice, and his family connections gave him credibility that Brittany could never have achieved on her own. But the most disturbing discovery came when Miranda traced the flow of money from my family's accounts. The stolen funds weren't just sitting in Ryan's personal accounts. They were being systematically moved through a complex network of shell companies and offshore accounts that Brittany had established. This wasn't amateur theft. This was a professional money laundering operation that suggested years of criminal experience and sophisticated legal knowledge. Armed with Miranda's financial evidence, we began implementing a coordinated counterattack that would strike at the heart of Brittany's criminal network. Our first move was to quietly freeze several bank accounts that Ryan had been accessing through identity theft. Miranda's connections at various financial institutions allowed us to flag these accounts as potentially fraudulent without alerting Ryan to our investigation. Within 72 hours, Ryan found himself unable to access nearly $30,000 that he had stolen from our parents. The account freezes had an immediate impact on Ryan's behavior, and Elena's recording equipment captured his panicked conversations with Brittany as they tried to understand what had happened to their stolen money. They initially assumed the freezes were routine security measures, but as more accounts became inaccessible, they began to suspect that someone was actively working against them. Brittany's calm demeanor began to crack as she realized that their previously foolproof system was being systematically dismantled. However, Ryan and Brittany's response to these financial setbacks revealed just how dangerous they could be when cornered. Rather than retreating or attempting to negotiate, they decided to escalate their attacks against me. Elena's recordings captured detailed conversations about their plan to file false police reports accusing me of threatening behavior and harassment. They were going to claim that I had been stalking the family, making threatening phone calls, and even vandalizing their property in revenge for losing my inheritance. Brittany had already begun implementing this new phase of their attack by the time we discovered their plan. She had created a series of threatening letters that were supposedly from me, complete with handwriting that had been carefully practiced to mimic my style. These letters contained detailed threats against Ryan, Brittany, and our parents, along with demands that they return my inheritance or face violent consequences. The letters were carefully crafted to make me appear mentally unstable and potentially dangerous. The sophistication of this frame-up attempt was breathtaking in its calculated cruelty. Brittany had not only forged threatening letters in my handwriting, but had also created a digital trail of evidence suggesting that I had been researching violent crimes and methods of harassment. She had used my personal information to create fake email accounts and social media profiles that contained disturbing content designed to support her narrative about my mental instability. When police officers arrived at my workplace 3 days later to question me about these alleged threats, I realized that Brittany had successfully weaponized law enforcement against me. The officers were professional, but clearly suspicious as they questioned me about my whereabouts during specific times when the threatening letters had allegedly been delivered. Without Elena's careful documentation of my activities and Miranda's evidence of the broader conspiracy, I could have easily found myself facing serious criminal charges. But our preparation paid off when the police investigation began to uncover inconsistencies in Brittany's story. The threatening letters had been delivered during times when security cameras at my apartment complex clearly showed me at home, and the postmarks on the envelopes didn't match the alleged delivery timeline. Most importantly, handwriting analysis revealed that while the letters superficially resembled my writing, they contained subtle characteristics that suggested deliberate forgery, rather than authentic emotional distress. As I sat in the police station answering questions about my family's allegations, I realized that this was no longer just about money or property. Brittany was willing to destroy my freedom and my future to protect her criminal enterprise. She had escalated from theft to attempted imprisonment, and I knew that she wouldn't stop until either I was completely eliminated as a threat or she was exposed and stopped. The war between us had entered a new phase, and the stakes had never been higher. The police investigation into the threatening letters was just the beginning of Brittany's campaign to destroy my life completely. Over the following weeks, she systematically attacked every aspect of my existence with a precision that revealed years of experience in character assassination. The threatening letters had been carefully timed to coincide with a broader assault on my reputation that would make me appear not just dangerous, but completely unhinged and untrustworthy. Brittany's next target was my professional life, and her attack there was devastatingly effective. She contacted my employer, Meridian Financial Services, claiming to be a concerned family member who had discovered that I was under police investigation for stalking and harassment. She provided carefully edited recordings of phone conversations that made me sound erratic and potentially violent, along with falsified documentation, suggesting that I had been making threatening statements about workplace violence. These recordings were sophisticated deepfake audio that had been created using samples of my voice from family videos and social media posts. The impact on my career was immediate and catastrophic. My supervisor, Janet Morrison, called me into her office within hours of Brittany's contact with Human Resources. Janet had always been supportive of my work, but the evidence that Brittany had provided was compelling enough to raise serious concerns about workplace safety. I found myself placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation, effectively cutting off my primary source of income at the worst possible time in my life. Even more devastating was Brittany's assault on my social reputation throughout our hometown. She had spent months building relationships with key members of our community, positioning herself as a concerned family member who was worried about my mental health and increasingly erratic behavior. She spread rumors through church groups, neighborhood associations, and local businesses, creating a narrative that painted me as someone who had become dangerous and unpredictable after losing my inheritance. These rumors were carefully crafted to contain just enough truth to be believable, while completely distorting the context of my situation. Brittany told people that I had been obsessed with money and family assets for years, that I had made inappropriate demands on my elderly parents, and that my behavior had become increasingly concerning to family members. She portrayed herself and Ryan as victims who were trying to protect our parents from my supposed harassment and manipulation. The most devastating betrayal during this period came from someone I had trusted implicitly with my deepest fears and vulnerabilities. Dr. Rebecca Morrison, the therapist I had been seeing to deal with the trauma of my family's betrayal, had been sharing confidential information from our sessions with Ryan and Brittany. Dr. Morrison had been contacted by Brittany, who posed as a concerned family member seeking guidance about how to help me deal with my mental health crisis. Brittany's manipulation of Dr. Morrison was particularly insidious because it exploited the therapist's genuine desire to help her patients. Brittany had convinced Dr. Morrison that I was in denial about my mental health issues, and that family intervention might be necessary to prevent me from harming myself or others. She had even provided Dr. Morrison with falsified medical records, suggesting that I had a history of psychiatric treatment and medication noncompliance that I had hidden during my intake sessions. This betrayal of therapeutic trust was devastating not just because of the violation of confidentiality, but because it meant that my own words and fears were being used as weapons against me. Every concern I had shared about feeling isolated and betrayed, every moment of despair I had expressed about my family's actions, was being twisted into evidence that I was mentally unstable and potentially dangerous. The safe space I had created to process my trauma had become another front in Brittany's war against me. The combination of workplace suspension, social isolation, and therapeutic betrayal brought me to the lowest point of my entire life. With my income eliminated and my reputation destroyed, I struggled to pay Elena and Miranda for their continued investigation. The financial pressure was enormous, and I began to question whether I could continue fighting against an enemy who seemed to have unlimited resources and no ethical boundaries. My darkest moment came when I discovered that Brittany had convinced our parents to file for a restraining order against me. The legal documents claimed that I had been harassing them with phone calls and unexpected visits, that I had made threatening statements about taking back my inheritance, by any means necessary, and that they were fearful for their safety, because of my increasingly erratic behavior. The restraining order effectively banned me from any contact with my own parents, and prohibited me from coming within 500 feet of the family home. Reading that restraining order was like having my heart ripped from my chest. My parents, who had raised me, who had held me when I was sick, who had celebrated every milestone of my life, were now legally declaring that they were afraid of me. The document was filled with lies and distortions, but it bore their signatures, and that was what mattered in the eyes of the law. I was being systematically erased from my own family's life, and the legal system was helping Brittany do it. The restraining order also had serious practical implications for Elena's investigation. We could no longer legally monitor conversations in the family home, and I was prohibited from accessing any personal belongings that remained in my childhood bedroom. Worse, the existence of the restraining order would be viewed as evidence of my dangerousness by police, prosecutors, and potential employers. Brittany had effectively weaponized the legal system against me. As I sat in my empty apartment that night, surrounded by legal documents that painted me as a dangerous stalker and harasser, I seriously considered giving up entirely. The financial cost of fighting was becoming unbearable. The emotional toll was destroying my mental health, and every legal victory Brittany achieved made my situation more hopeless. She had successfully isolated me from my family, destroyed my career, and turned my own community against me. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wondered if it might be easier to simply walk away and start over somewhere else. But even in my darkest moment, Elena's voice echoed in my memory, reminding me that people like Brittany only succeeded when their victims gave up fighting. Somewhere in the evidence we had gathered was the key to exposing her entire criminal enterprise. I just had to find it before she succeeded in destroying me completely. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of retreating, I was going to fight back harder than ever before. The breakthrough that would ultimately save my life came from the most unlikely source imaginable. Miranda's forensic accounting investigation had expanded far beyond my family's finances, and she had been quietly building a comprehensive case against Brittany's entire criminal network. What she discovered would not only vindicate me, but expose a level of criminality that shocked even Elena, who had seen every type of family fraud imaginable. Miranda's analysis revealed that Ryan had been embezzling money from his own employer, Consolidated Insurance Group, using the same signature forgery techniques he had perfected on our father's documents. Over the course of 18 months, Ryan had stolen nearly $40,000 from client escrow accounts by forging his supervisor's signature on withdrawal authorizations. The embezzlement was sophisticated enough that it had gone undetected by routine audits, but Miranda's forensic techniques revealed patterns in the documentation that clearly indicated systematic theft. This discovery was a game-changer because it meant that Ryan's criminal activity extended far beyond family fraud into federal white-collar crime. The stolen money from Consolidated Insurance had crossed state lines as it moved through Brittany's money laundering network, making it a federal offense that would be prosecuted by the FBI rather than local authorities. Suddenly, we weren't just dealing with family disputes and inheritance theft, we were dealing with federal crimes that carried serious prison sentences. But the most explosive discovery came when Elena finally succeeded in accessing court records from Brittany's previous marriages that had been sealed by protective orders. Working with a private investigator in Arizona who specialized in unsealing confidential documents, Elena obtained copies of criminal charges that had been filed against Brittany under her maiden name, Rebecca Lynn Foster. These documents revealed that Brittany had been convicted of elder abuse in Nevada 5 years earlier, serving 18 months in prison before being released on parole. The elder abuse conviction involved a case that was almost identical to what she was attempting with my family. Brittany had befriended an elderly widow, gained her trust, and then systematically isolated her from her children while convincing her to change her will. When the woman's children tried to intervene, Brittany had used the same tactics she was using against me: false accusations, forged documents, and manipulation of legal authorities. The only difference was that in Nevada, the victim's children had been able to prove the manipulation before Brittany could complete her theft. Elena's investigation also revealed that Brittany's criminal history was far more extensive than even the Nevada conviction suggested. Using facial recognition technology and database searches, Elena connected Brittany to at least 6 different identities she had used across multiple states. In each case, she had targeted families with significant assets, used similar manipulation tactics, and disappeared with substantial amounts of money before authorities could build cases against her. My family wasn't just another target. We were part of a criminal enterprise that had been operating for over a decade. The most shocking revelation was the discovery that Derek's involvement in the conspiracy against me wasn't just about financial desperation. Elena's investigation revealed that Derek was actually Brittany's cousin, and they had been working together on inheritance theft schemes for years. Derek's failing landscaping business was actually a front for money laundering stolen inheritance funds, and his supposed desperation for Ryan's loan had been completely fabricated to give him credibility as a reluctant accomplice. This family connection explained how Brittany had been able to manipulate our family dynamics so effectively. Derek had been feeding her inside information about our family for months before she even met Ryan, allowing her to craft her manipulation strategy with insider knowledge of our relationships, financial situations, and emotional vulnerabilities. The entire courtship between Brittany and Ryan had been a calculated operation designed to position her for maximum asset theft. Armed with this evidence, Elena and Miranda developed a plan that would expose the entire criminal network while protecting me from further retaliation. But we needed to move quickly because Miranda's monitoring of financial networks had detected signs that Brittany was preparing to flee the country with the stolen funds. Wire transfer records showed that large amounts of money were being moved to offshore accounts in countries without extradition treaties with the United States. The time pressure intensified when Elena discovered that the competency hearing for my parents was scheduled for the following week. Brittany had accelerated her timeline after realizing that her financial accounts were being frozen, and she was attempting to gain legal control over my parents' remaining assets before her criminal activity was exposed. If she succeeded in having them declared incompetent, she would have complete access to their remaining $400,000 in retirement and investment accounts. But Elena's investigation had also uncovered evidence of the most serious crime in Brittany's arsenal: medical manipulation. Working with Dr. Patricia Huang, a geriatric specialist that Miranda had consulted on previous cases, we discovered that my parents' apparent cognitive decline was being artificially induced through systematic medication overdoses. Brittany had been crushing additional doses of my father's blood pressure medication and my mother's anxiety medication into their food, creating symptoms that mimic dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Dr. Huang's analysis of my parents' medical records revealed clear signs of drug-induced cognitive impairment that had been misdiagnosed as natural aging by their regular physician. The symptoms had appeared suddenly and progressed rapidly, which was inconsistent with typical dementia progression. Most importantly, Dr. Huang confirmed that the cognitive effects could be reversed if the medication poisoning stopped immediately. This discovery meant that Brittany wasn't just stealing money. She was slowly killing my parents through deliberate poisoning. The realization filled me with a rage that was almost overwhelming, but it also gave me the final piece of evidence I needed to expose her completely. With proof of embezzlement, identity theft, elder abuse, fraud, and attempted murder, we finally had enough evidence to bring down her entire criminal enterprise. However, we also discovered that Brittany had detected some of our investigation activities and was preparing to accelerate her final theft phase. Elena's surveillance revealed that Brittany had already booked international flights for the following month and had transferred the maximum allowable daily amounts to offshore accounts for the past 2 weeks. We were in a race against time to expose her crimes before she could escape with millions of dollars in stolen assets and leave my family destroyed in her wake. The next phase of our counterattack would require perfect timing and flawless execution. We would have only one chance to coordinate with law enforcement, medical professionals, and financial institutions to simultaneously expose Brittany's crimes and save my parents' lives. Everything we had worked for over the past months would come down to a single coordinated strike that would either vindicate me completely or give Brittany the final victory she needed to escape justice forever. With Dr. Huang's medical evidence confirming that my parents were being systematically poisoned, our counterattack shifted into its most critical phase. Elena assembled a team of specialists that included Dr. Huang, Miranda, a federal prosecutor named David Chun who specialized in financial crimes, and Detective Sarah Martinez from the police department's fraud division. This wasn't just about recovering my inheritance anymore. We were working to save my parents' lives and stop a serial criminal who had been destroying families for over a decade. Dr. Huang's intervention began immediately with a covert medical assessment of my parents' condition. Using her connections at their family physician's office, She arranged for routine blood work that would reveal the extent of the medication poisoning without alerting Brittany to our investigation. The results were even worse than we had feared. Both of my parents showed dangerous levels of multiple medications in their bloodstreams, and my father's heart showed signs of serious stress from prolonged drug overdose. The medical evidence also revealed the sophistication of Brittany's poisoning method. She hadn't simply been giving them extra pills, which would have been easily detected. Instead, she had been gradually increasing their dosages over several months, while also introducing additional medications that enhanced the cognitive impairment effects. Dr. Huang explained that this type of systematic poisoning required significant medical knowledge and careful planning, confirming that Brittany was far more dangerous than we had initially realized. While Dr. Huang worked to reverse the medication poisoning, Miranda implemented a financial trap that would expose the full scope of Ryan's embezzlement from his employer. She created a sophisticated fake investment opportunity that appeared to offer enormous returns with minimal risk, then used Elena's contacts to present this opportunity to Ryan through a seemingly independent financial advisor. The investment required Ryan to transfer $50,000 from various accounts, money that he would have to steal from his employer to access. The fake investment was actually a carefully monitored sting operation that would document every step of Ryan's theft process. Miranda had coordinated with federal investigators to ensure that Ryan's embezzlement would be captured in real time, providing irrefutable evidence of his criminal activity. The beauty of the trap was that Ryan's greed and desperation would force him to commit his crimes while being actively monitored by law enforcement. Ryan took the bait even faster than we had anticipated. Within 48 hours of being presented with the fake investment opportunity, he had forged his supervisor's signature on multiple documents and transferred nearly $60,000 from client accounts into his personal banking. Federal agents captured every transaction as it occurred, building a complete case file that would make prosecution inevitable. But while our financial trap was succeeding perfectly, Brittany was accelerating her own criminal activities in ways that caught us off guard. Elena's surveillance revealed that Brittany had hired Derek to break into my apartment and plant evidence that would support new criminal charges against me. Derek's assignment was to plant illegal drugs and stolen property that could be discovered during a police raid, providing Brittany with the evidence she needed to have me arrested and removed as a threat. Fortunately, Elena's surveillance system had detected Derek's reconnaissance of my apartment building, and we were able to prepare for his break-in attempt. Working with Detective Martinez, we set up our own surveillance operation that would capture Derek in the act of planting evidence, while also documenting his connection to Brittany's larger conspiracy. The apartment became a carefully monitored crime scene where Derek would unknowingly provide evidence that would expose his entire criminal network. The evidence planting operation took place on a Tuesday night when Derek believed I was out of town visiting friends. Elena's hidden cameras captured every moment as Derek used a copied key to enter my apartment and strategically placed packets of cocaine and stolen jewelry throughout my belongings. What Derek didn't realize was that the stolen jewelry he was planting had been provided by police as part of the sting operation, and every item contained tracking devices that would lead investigators directly back to Brittany. Derek's confession under police interrogation revealed details about the conspiracy that shocked even Elena and Miranda. Brittany's operation was far more extensive than we had realized, involving a network of accomplices across multiple states and a sophisticated system for laundering stolen assets through legitimate businesses. Derek himself had been involved in similar schemes targeting 5 other families over the past 3 years, always using his family connections to gain trust and insider access to financial information. The most disturbing revelation from Derek's confession was that my family wasn't even Brittany's primary target. She had been simultaneously running similar operations against 2 other families, using identical tactics to isolate family members and steal their inheritances. The systematic nature of her crimes and the number of victims involved meant that federal prosecutors were dealing with a criminal enterprise that had stolen millions of dollars and destroyed dozens of lives. However, Derek's arrest and confession created new dangers for our operation. Brittany immediately realized that her network was being exposed, and she accelerated her timeline for both the competency hearing and her planned escape from the country. Elena's surveillance detected frantic activity as Brittany began liquidating assets and transferring money to offshore accounts at an unprecedented pace. The most critical development came when Dr. Huang's medical intervention began to reverse the effects of the medication poisoning. As my parents' cognitive function started to improve, they began questioning the narrative that Brittany had constructed about my supposed dangerousness and mental instability. My father, in particular, started expressing doubts about the restraining order and asking questions about the evidence that had been used to justify cutting me off from the family. This improvement in my parents' mental clarity created both an opportunity and a vulnerability. While it meant they might be able to understand the truth about Brittany's manipulation, it also meant that Brittany would likely realize her poisoning scheme was being detected and could escalate to more direct forms of violence. Elena's team increased security around my parents' home and began preparing for the possibility that Brittany might attempt to harm them directly rather than risk exposure. The competency hearing was now just 5 days away, and federal prosecutors were still building their case against Brittany's criminal enterprise. We needed to coordinate a simultaneous strike that would expose all of her crimes while protecting my parents and ensuring she couldn't escape justice. Everything we had worked for was coming together, but we were also entering the most dangerous phase of the entire operation. Brittany was desperate, cornered, and had already proven she was willing to commit attempted murder to protect her criminal enterprise. The coordinated strike against Brittany's criminal network began at 6 a.m. on a cold Thursday morning, just 24 hours before the scheduled competency hearing for my parents. Federal agents, local police, medical personnel, and financial investigators moved simultaneously across multiple locations to execute what Prosecutor David Chen called one of the most complex family fraud operations he had ever encountered. Elena had spent weeks coordinating every detail of this operation, and now everything depended on perfect timing and flawless execution. Dr. Huang arrived at my parents' home first, ostensibly for a routine follow-up medical visit that Brittany couldn't refuse without raising suspicions. Her real mission was to document my parents' improving cognitive function and to ensure their safety during the dramatic events that would unfold over the next several hours. As Dr. Huang conducted her examination, my parents showed clear signs of mental clarity that directly contradicted the medical evidence Brittany had presented for the competency hearing. Meanwhile, federal agents were executing search warrants at Ryan's workplace, Derek's business premises, and 3 properties connected to Brittany's money laundering network. Miranda had provided investigators with detailed financial maps that showed exactly where to find evidence of the stolen funds and forged documents. The coordinated raids were designed to prevent any of the conspirators from destroying evidence or warning their accomplices about the investigation. The most crucial element of the operation was the confrontation I would have with my family at our parents' home. Elena had arranged for hidden recording equipment throughout the house, and Detective Martinez was positioned nearby to intervene if the situation became dangerous. My role was to present my parents with evidence of Brittany's crimes while giving Brittany and Ryan the opportunity to incriminate themselves through their responses. When I arrived at the family home, the tension was immediately apparent. Brittany's face went pale when she saw me, and I could tell she was calculating whether to call the police about the restraining order or to try to maintain her innocent facade. Ryan seemed confused and nervous, constantly looking to Brittany for guidance about how to handle my unexpected appearance. My parents, however, looked more alert and focused than they had in months, thanks to Dr. Huang's medical intervention. "I know what you've been doing, Brittany," I said, placing a folder of documents on the kitchen table. "I know about the forged signatures, the stolen money, and the medication you've been giving Mom and Dad." The effect of my words was immediate and dramatic. Brittany's calm mask slipped completely, revealing the calculating criminal beneath, while Ryan's face showed genuine shock as he began to realize the extent of his wife's manipulation. Brittany's response was swift and vicious. She immediately accused me of harassment and threatened to call the police, but I could see the fear in her eyes as she realized her carefully constructed lies were falling apart. "You're delusional, Victoria," she snapped. "Everyone knows you've been having mental problems since you lost your inheritance. Now you're making up conspiracy theories to justify your own failures." But my parents' reactions proved that Dr. Huang's treatment had been successful. Instead of looking confused or frightened by my accusations, they were studying the documents I had brought with clear understanding and growing horror. My father picked up one of the forged bank withdrawal slips and compared it to his actual signature on other documents. The difference was obvious even to someone without forensic training. "Ryan, did you sign my name on this?" my father asked, his voice steady but filled with disappointment. Ryan's response was immediate and panicked. He began making excuses and explanations that only served to confirm his guilt. He claimed he had only been trying to help with their finances, that he had permission to handle their accounts, that he was protecting them from my supposed attempts to steal their money. Brittany realized that Ryan's panicked confessions were destroying their defense, and she tried to regain control of the situation through intimidation and threats. "You have no right to be here," she told me. "There's a restraining order, and I'm calling the police right now." But when she reached for her phone, my mother's voice stopped her cold. "Rebecca, why have you been putting extra pills in our food?" my mother asked, using Brittany's real name for the first time in years. The question hit Brittany like a physical blow, and for a moment, she was too shocked to respond. Dr. Huang had obviously shared some of her findings with my parents, and they were now confronting Brittany with the most serious of her crimes. The confrontation escalated quickly as Brittany realized she was trapped and exposed. Her response was swift and violent, revealing the dangerous criminal beneath her manipulative facade. She grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter and pointed it at me, screaming that I had ruined everything and that I would pay for destroying her life. "You couldn't just disappear like you were supposed to," she shouted. "You had to keep fighting and ruin everything." Ryan's reaction to his wife's violence was immediate and telling. Instead of supporting her or trying to calm the situation, he backed away from her in obvious fear. "Brittany, put the knife down," he pleaded. "This isn't what we agreed to. You said this was just about getting Victoria's inheritance, not about hurting anyone." His words revealed that even Ryan hadn't known the full extent of his wife's criminal activity. The situation might have ended in tragedy, but Elena's coordination with Detective Martinez proved perfect. The moment Brittany brandished the knife, Detective Martinez and two other officers entered through the back door, quickly disarming and restraining her before anyone could be injured. The entire confrontation had been recorded by multiple hidden cameras, providing irrefutable evidence of Brittany's threats and admissions of guilt. Brittany's arrest was just the beginning of a cascade of legal consequences that would destroy the entire criminal network. As she was being handcuffed, federal agents were simultaneously arresting Derek at his business and serving Ryan with federal charges related to his embezzlement from Consolidated Insurance. The coordinated operation had successfully prevented any of the conspirators from escaping or destroying evidence. But the most satisfying moment came when Detective Martinez informed Brittany that federal investigators had been monitoring her offshore bank accounts for weeks. The money she thought she had successfully hidden was being frozen by international law enforcement agencies, and her planned escape route had been completely blocked. Years of criminal activity were being unraveled in a single day, and all of her victims would finally have the chance for justice. As I watched Brittany being led away in handcuffs, screaming threats and accusations at everyone around her, I felt a sense of vindication that I had never experienced before. The woman who had tried to destroy my life, steal my family's assets, and poison my parents was finally being held accountable for her crimes. The nightmare that had consumed my life for months was finally coming to an end, and my family's legacy would be restored. The legal proceedings that followed Brittany's arrest moved with remarkable speed, largely because of the overwhelming evidence that Elena, Miranda, and federal investigators had compiled. Brittany was charged with elder abuse, fraud, forgery, identity theft, money laundering, attempted murder through poisoning, and operating a criminal enterprise across multiple states. The federal prosecutor's office described her case as one of the most comprehensive inheritance theft operations they had ever encountered. Ryan's situation was complicated by the question of how much he had known about his wife's criminal background and methods. While he was clearly guilty of embezzlement and fraud, federal investigators determined that he had been manipulated by Brittany just as much as the rest of our family. His cooperation with the investigation and his obvious shock at learning about the poisoning scheme resulted in a plea agreement that reduced his potential prison sentence from 25 years to 5 years in federal prison. Derek faced charges related to money laundering, conspiracy, and evidence tampering, but his decision to cooperate fully with investigators and testify against Brittany earned him a reduced sentence of 3 years in prison followed by 5 years of probation. His landscaping business was permanently shut down, and all assets connected to the criminal enterprise were seized by federal authorities for victim restitution. The most severe punishment was reserved for Brittany herself. During her trial, prosecutors presented evidence that her criminal activities had affected over 20 families across 8 states, resulting in more than $4 million in stolen assets and immeasurable emotional trauma. The judge sentenced her to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that she would never again be able to target vulnerable families. But the legal victory was only part of my journey toward healing and restoration. The financial recovery process was complex, involving multiple agencies and institutions, but ultimately successful in returning the vast majority of stolen assets to their rightful owners. My family's house was cleared of all fraudulent liens and encumbrances, and my inheritance was fully restored. The college fund that had been emptied was replenished with interest, and additional damages were awarded to compensate for the emotional trauma and financial losses I had suffered. My parents' recovery from the medication poisoning was gradual, but complete. Dr. Huang continued to monitor their health for several months, and their cognitive function returned to normal levels as the drug toxins cleared from their systems. The experience had aged them considerably, but it had also opened their eyes to how completely they had been manipulated by someone they had trusted implicitly. Their guilt and remorse about their treatment of me was profound, and rebuilding our relationship became a central focus of their remaining years. The process of repairing my relationship with my parents was challenging and required extensive family counseling, but it ultimately brought us closer together than we had ever been before. They understood that their favoritism toward Ryan had created the vulnerability that Brittany had exploited, and they worked hard to demonstrate their love and respect for me through both words and actions. We spent countless hours talking through the trauma of the past year, and they became my strongest supporters as I worked to rebuild my life. My professional rehabilitation was also remarkably successful. When the truth about Brittany's frame-up campaign became public, Meridian Financial Services not only reinstated me with full back pay, but also promoted me to senior analyst with a substantial salary increase. The company's leadership recognized that I had been the victim of an elaborate criminal conspiracy, and they wanted to demonstrate their support for employees who faced similar challenges. Elena Rodriguez became more than just a professional ally. She became one of my closest friends, and eventually my romantic partner. Our shared experience of fighting against Brittany's criminal enterprise had created a bond that deepened into love over the months following the trial. Elena understood the trauma I had experienced in a way that few people could, and her strength and determination had been crucial to my survival during the darkest period of my life. The most meaningful aspect of my recovery was the decision to transform my traumatic experience into a source of help for other victims. Working with Elena, I established a nonprofit organization called Family Justice Advocates that provides investigative and legal support for families facing inheritance theft and elder abuse. Our organization has helped expose several criminal operations similar to Brittany's, and we've successfully recovered millions of dollars in stolen assets for victims across the country. Dr. Huang joined our organization as a medical consultant, helping us identify cases where elderly victims are being systematically poisoned or manipulated through medication abuse. Her expertise has been crucial in saving lives and providing evidence for criminal prosecutions. The medical manipulation tactics that Brittany used against my parents have unfortunately become more common as criminals become more sophisticated in their methods. Miranda also became a permanent part of our team, using her forensic accounting skills to unravel complex financial crimes and trace stolen assets through elaborate money laundering networks. Together, we've developed investigative techniques that have been adopted by law enforcement agencies across the country, making it much more difficult for criminals like Brittany to operate without detection. The house where I grew up has been converted into a training center and resource facility for our organization. The rooms where Brittany plotted my family's destruction now serve as offices where investigators work to protect other families from similar crimes. The irony is deeply satisfying. The home that was almost stolen from me has become a weapon against inheritance thieves and elder abusers. As I write this story, 3 years have passed since Brittany's arrest, and my life has been transformed in ways I never could have imagined. The experience taught me that family is defined not just by blood relations, but by the people who stand with you during your darkest moments. Elena, Miranda, Dr. Huang, and even Detective Martinez have become my chosen family, bonded together by our shared commitment to justice and protection of the vulnerable. The trauma of betrayal and the fight for justice changed me fundamentally, but it also revealed strengths I never knew I possessed. I learned that even when everything seems hopeless, even when the people you trust most turn against you, it's possible to fight back and reclaim your life. The key is refusing to give up, finding allies who believe in justice, and never underestimating your own capacity for resilience and determination. Today, as I stand in the same spot where this story began, outside the home that almost became a symbol of my family's betrayal, I see something completely different. This house now represents triumph over adversity, the power of truth over deception, and the ultimate victory of justice over greed. The rain that soaked me on that terrible night has given way to sunshine, and the future holds infinite possibilities for healing, growth, and service to others. What would you do if you discovered your family had betrayed you this completely? Have you ever experienced the kind of systematic manipulation that Brittany used against my family? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video if you believe that justice and determination can overcome even the most sophisticated criminal conspiracies. Subscribe for more stories of ordinary people who refused to be victims and fought back against those who tried to destroy them. Share this story with anyone who might be facing family betrayal or elder abuse, because knowledge and awareness are our best weapons against predators like Brittany. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that no matter how dark your situation might seem, there is always hope for justice and healing. May you find the strength to fight for what's right, and may you always be surrounded by people who value truth over convenience and justice over greed.